Lydia Hart was only 18 when her world shattered. She lived in a modest Chicago home with her mother, a kind woman who raised her alone until she remarried Raymond Foster, a rising politician with a sharp smile and sharper ambitions. Lydia took her mother's maiden name, Hart, from her biological father, who died before she was born. Clara Foster came later, the golden child of Raymond and Lydia's mother. When Lydia was 10, her mother passed away from illness, leaving her in Raymond's care. He tolerated her, but his eyes always lit up for Clara, his real daughter. That tolerance ended 3 years ago, in 2022, when a car crash changed everything. Raymond, drunk behind the wheel, swerved into another vehicle, killing a young woman named Evelyn Pierce. Lydia was in the passenger seat, screaming the truth as flames licked the wreckage. Raymond silenced her, pinning the blame on her fragile mind. Within days, Raymond fabricated a story. He told the police Lydia had a breakdown, claiming she was unstable, a danger to herself and others. Clara smirked as he signed the papers, saying, "You're not my sister, you're a burden." They sent her to Willow Creek Institute, a private psychiatric facility on the outskirts of Chicago, funded by Raymond's dirty money. There, Lydia was labeled a high-risk patient. They strapped an electronic wristband on her, a sleek device meant to track her every move, ensuring she'd never escape. The staff pumped her full of sedatives, dulling her senses but not her will. To survive, Lydia learned to play a part. She'd giggle at nothing, stumble over words, and say things like, "I just want flowers, pretty flowers," whenever they questioned her. They thought she was broken, harmless, a shell of a girl. But inside, her mind burned with one goal, revenge. Every night she replayed that final betrayal. Clara's cold laugh, Raymond's dismissive glare as he handed her over to the orderlies. "You're a stain we need to erase," he said, turning away. The pain of being cast out by the only family she had left fueled her. She wasn't their blood, not fully, and they made sure she knew it. For 3 years she endured the locked doors, the pills, the suffocating routine, all while plotting her return. She'd make them pay for stealing her life, for burying her in a place where no one would look. Willow Creek was a prison dressed up as a hospital, a dumping ground for secrets like hers. Then came Julian Pierce. At 30, he was the CEO of Pierce Enterprises, a New York tech empire he inherited after his father's death. A prodigy who turned grief into power, Julian had built a reputation as a man who never lost. One day, a crumpled letter arrived at his desk. Unsigned, scrawled with a single line, "A patient at Willow Creek knows the truth about the 2022 crash." That crash had taken his sister Evelyn 12 years ago, when Julian was 27. He'd spent years chasing shadows, desperate to uncover what really happened. The letter was a spark. He dug into Willow Creek, a facility tied to shady political deals, and found Lydia Hart on their patient list. Her photo stopped him cold. She looked like Evelyn, same dark hair, same haunted eyes. Was it a coincidence, or something more? Julian stormed into Willow Creek with a team of lawyers, demanding her release. The staff caved under his threats, and he pulled Lydia out of that hellhole, bringing her to a sprawling Ravenwood estate in Manhattan. She blinked at the towering windows, the polished floors, a world so far from the padded cells she'd known. But freedom came with a catch. Julian watched her closely, his gaze sharp, searching. Lydia didn't trust him. Why would a man like him save a nobody like her? She kept up the act, tripping over her feet, smiling blankly, hiding the fire inside. She needed to know his game, needed time to plan. As she settled into Ravenwood, one question lingered. Did Julian want justice for his sister, or was Lydia the key to a deeper wound he carried? Lydia Hart woke to the sound of rain tapping against the tall windows of Ravenwood Estate. The room Julian had given her was bigger than any cell at Willow Creek, with soft sheets and a view of Manhattan's skyline, but it didn't feel like freedom. She caught her reflection in a mirror, pale skin, dark circles under her eyes, a stranger in a borrowed life. She couldn't let her guard down, not here, not with him. Julian Pierce moved through the house like a shadow, always watching, always calculating, She needed to stay ahead, needed to figure out why he'd pulled her from that institute. So she played her part, the same one that kept her alive for 3 years. She'd stumble over rugs, drop a glass of water with a sheepish laugh, pretend she didn't know how to turn on the fancy lights. "Oh, this is tricky," she'd mumble, wide-eyed while her mind raced, piecing together every word he said, every glance he gave. Julian wasn't what she expected. At 30, he carried himself with the weight of someone older, a man forged by loss and ambition. He'd inherited Pierce Enterprises after his father's death, a tech giant that made him one of New York's most powerful players. But power didn't explain the way he looked at her, a mix of suspicion and something softer, something she couldn't name. She noticed it first on her second day when she wandered into his study, pretending to be lost. Books lined the walls, a desk cluttered with papers, and there, on a shelf, a framed photo stopped her cold. A girl, maybe 18, with dark hair and a shy smile stared back at her. She looked like Lydia, or what Lydia might have been before Willow Creek stole her youth. Her heart thudded. Was this Evelyn, the sister he'd lost? Was that why he'd saved her? Because she was a ghost of someone he couldn't let go? She didn't ask. Asking meant breaking the act, and she wasn't ready to show her cards. Instead, she kept moving, kept watching. Julian controlled her world here, locking the windows, setting rules about where she could go. "For your safety," he said, his voice low, but she heard the edge in it. He didn't trust her either, yet there were moments that threw her off balance, moments she couldn't explain. One evening, a storm rolled in, and she shivered in the drafty hall, rubbing her arms. Julian appeared with a thick sweater, draping it over her shoulders without a word. His fingers brushed her neck, warm against her cold skin, and she froze. He didn't pull away right away, his eyes lingering on hers, dark and unreadable. "Don't catch a cold," he muttered, then turned back to his work. Her pulse raced, a tangle of fear and something else she refused to name. She couldn't afford to feel anything for him, not when he might be her next cage. Those moments kept coming, chipping at her resolve. One night, she staged a fall in the kitchen, knocking over a bowl of fruit. Apples rolled across the floor, and she sank down, clutching her ankle with a fake whimper. Julian was there in seconds, kneeling beside her, his hands gentle as he checked for injury. "You're too clumsy," he said, but his tone was soft, almost tender. He lifted her into his arms, carrying her to a chair, and for a heartbeat, she forgot to breathe. His grip was firm, his breath warm against her hair, and when he set her down, he stayed close, brushing a tear from her cheek she hadn't meant to let fall. "I won't let anyone hurt you again," he said, his voice rough with something raw. She stared at him, caught between the act and a flicker of truth. Did he mean it, or was this part of his game? That rawness came into focus later, in a moment she didn't plan. She found him in the study one evening, staring at that photo of Evelyn. He didn't hear her come in, too lost in whatever memory held him. She stood there, silent, as he picked up the frame, his fingers tracing the glass. "I should have been there," he said, so quiet she almost missed it. His shoulders slumped, and he set the photo down, rubbing his face like he could erase the pain. Lydia's chest tightened. She knew that kind of guilt, the kind that ate you alive. She stepped forward, letting a book slip from her hands with a thud. He turned, startled, and she smiled her vacant smile. "Oops, silly me," she chirped, bending to pick it up. But his eyes stayed on her, piercing, like he saw more than she wanted him to. He spoke then, unprompted, his voice heavy. "Evelyn was 18 when she died. 12 years ago. We fought that night about something stupid, college plans I don't even remember. I let her drive home alone and she never made it." He looked away, jaw tight. "I was 27, old enough to know better, and I failed her." Lydia stood frozen, the book clutched to her chest. She hadn't expected this crack in his armor. She wanted to ask about the crash, about Raymond, but she couldn't. Not yet. Instead, she tilted her head, murmuring, "She's pretty." like a child admiring a doll. Julian's gaze snapped back to her, searching, and for a moment she thought he'd call her bluff, but he only nodded, turning away. Yeah, she was. Her mind spun as she left the room. Evelyn's death wasn't just a tragedy to him, it was a wound that never healed. He blamed himself, carried it every day, and now she was tangled in it. She saw it in the way he watched her, like she was a puzzle he couldn't solve, or maybe a second chance he didn't deserve. It made her uneasy, made her question her own walls. She hated Raymond for what he'd done, hated Clara for standing by him, but Julian was different. He controlled her, yes, but there was a pain in him that mirrored hers, a shared scar she couldn't ignore. She pushed it down, locked it away. She couldn't trust him, couldn't let herself feel anything. He'd saved her, but why? Was it Evelyn's face he saw, or something else? Back in Chicago, Raymond and Clara Foster lived untouched by the past. Their mansion gleamed with wealth, a fortress of lies built on Lydia's suffering. Clara, now 20, was the city's darling, posting photos of her perfect life online, her blonde hair and designer dresses a stark contrast to the sister she'd erased. She was planning her grand social debut at the Grand Regency Hotel, a night to cement her place among the elite. Raymond beamed beside her in every picture. The proud father, the untouchable politician. They thought Lydia was gone, locked away forever, her voice silenced by drugs and steel walls. They didn't know she'd escaped, didn't know she was watching, waiting. She'd been their scapegoat, their discard, but not anymore. Lydia paced her room at Ravenwood, the sweater Julian gave her still draped over a chair. She touched it, fingers lingering on the wool, then pulled back. She couldn't let him in, couldn't let anyone in. Her heart was a battlefield, torn between the hate that kept her alive and the flicker of warmth she felt in his presence. She didn't know what he wanted from her, didn't know if he was savior or captor, but she knew one thing. She'd play this game, keep up the act, until she could turn the tables. Raymond and Clara had taken everything, her mother's love, her freedom, her voice. She'd take it all back, piece by piece. And Julian? He was either her way out or her next fight. She'd find out soon enough. Lydia Hart had spent 3 years perfecting her mask at Willow Creek Institute. The padded walls, the sterile air, the constant hum of fluorescent lights, all of it pressed against her. But she'd turned it into a stage. She'd giggle at the shadows on the ceiling, fold scraps of paper into crude flowers, and hand them to the staff with a vacant smile. "Pretty, right?" she'd say, her voice soft and childish, eyes wide with feigned wonder. They bought it, every one of them, thinking she was just another broken mind lost to the drugs they fed her. But Grace, a young nurse with tired eyes and a gentle touch, was different. She'd take the flowers, tuck them into her pocket, and pat Lydia's hand. "You're a sweet one," Grace would murmur, her voice a rare warmth in that cold place. Lydia latched onto it, not out of trust but necessity. Grace was her way out, even if the nurse didn't know it yet. The electronic wristband was her chain. Sleek and silver, it clung to her skin, a constant reminder of Raymond Foster's betrayal. She'd traced its edges 1,000 times, feeling the tiny seams, the faint hume of its power. It tracked her, kept her locked in Willow Creek's grip, and she hated it more than the needles or the pills. But hate wasn't enough. She needed a plan. She watched the staff, studied their routines, and one day a maintenance worker came to fix a flickering light. He grumbled about the wristbands, muttering to a nurse about a hidden reset button that needed a 4-digit code. "Pain in the neck to fix when they glitch," he said, tapping one with a tool. Lydia filed it away, her heart pounding beneath her blank stare. She didn't know the code, but she knew who might. Grace became her target. Lydia ramped up the act, stumbling more, offering more flowers, her voice a sing-song lilt. "Grace is my friend," she'd say, clutching the nurse's arm with a grin. Grace would laugh, ruffle her hair, and let her guard down just a little. It took months, but the moment came one gray afternoon. Lydia staged a fall in the common room, sprawling on the floor with a wail. "My wrist hurts," she cried, clutching the band. tears welling up on cue. Grace knelt beside her, soothing her with soft words, then checked the wristband's display to log its status. 2, 4, 6, 8. Grace mumbled under her breath, typing the code into a handheld device to test it. Lydia's pulse surged, but she kept her face slack, whimpering until Grace helped her up. She had it, the key to her cage. She waited, biding her time, knowing escape from Willow Creek wasn't just about the wristband. The locks, the guards, the sedatives, they all held her back. But then Julian Pierce arrived. She didn't see him come in, didn't hear the shouting match with the director, only felt the chaos ripple through the halls. Patients shuffled nervously, staff whispered in corners, and Grace looked rattled when she brought Lydia her evening pills. "Something's happening," Grace said, distracted, handing over the cup. Lydia palmed the pills instead of swallowing, her mind racing. Footsteps echoed, heavy and purposeful, and then Julian burst into the ward, flanked by 2 men in suits. His presence filled the room, tall and commanding, his dark eyes scanning until they landed on her. "Her," he said, pointing. "I'm taking her out. Now." The staff protested, citing regulations, but Julian's voice cut through like steel. "You'll release her, or I'll have this place shut down by morning. Your choice." He waved a stack of papers. Legal threats or bribes, Lydia couldn't tell, and didn't care. The director backed down, and Grace hurried to unlock Lydia's restraints, muttering apologies. Lydia kept her head low, shuffling forward with a dazed smile, but her eyes darted to the exit. This was her chance, not just to leave Willow Creek, but to shed the wristband, too. As Julian argued with a guard near the door, she slipped behind a supply cart, heart hammering. Her fingers found the reset button, a tiny ridge on the band's underside. She pressed it, held her breath, and punched in the code, 2468. A soft click, a faint beep, and the band loosened. She yanked it off, shoving it under a stack of towels, and stepped back into view, rubbing her wrist like nothing had happened. Julian grabbed her arm, pulling her out into the night. Rain soaked her thin hospital gown, but she didn't feel it, only the weightlessness of her bare wrist. She was free, or close to it. He drove her to Ravenwood estate, silent the whole way, his jaw tight. She wondered what he knew, what he wanted, but she kept up the act, staring out the window with a vacant hum. At Ravenwood she played the fool, tripping up the chandelier, hiding the truth. She wasn't staying. She couldn't. Raymond and Clara thought she was gone, buried in that institute, but she'd claw her way back to ruin them. Julian was a means to an end, nothing more. She'd escape him too. Days turned into weeks, and she watched him. He left for Boston one morning, a business trip, his absence a crack in her prison. She had hoarded cash at Willow Creek, small bills and coins scavenged from forgotten pockets in the laundry room, tucked into her mattress over 3 years. It wasn't much, but it was enough. She slipped out of Ravenwood at dawn, heart pounding as she navigated the streets of Manhattan. A shady pawn shop in a back alley took her money, handed her a fake ID, Sienna Brooks. She stared at the card. A new name, a new start. No more Lydia Hart, the girl they'd thrown away. She was someone else now, someone who'd make them pay. Back in her room that night, before she left for good, she rifled through Julian's study. He'd been careless, leaving his laptop open, and she found an email chain buried in a folder labeled Evelyn. Her hands shook as she read. Messages between Julian and a private investigator, dated months ago, detailed the 2022 crash. Raymond Foster involved. One line read, "Witness silenced, sent to Willow Creek." Her breath caught. Raymond had killed Evelyn Pierce, Julian's sister, and she'd been there. Fragments of memory flickered, hazy from the drugs. She saw the car swerving, heard herself scream, "You're drunk!" before hands clamped over her mouth, a needle piercing her arm. She'd tried to tell the truth, but they drowned it in sedatives, locked it away with her. She stumbled back, the room spinning. Julian knew, he'd known all along that Raymond was the killer, that she'd been in that car. The letter he'd gotten, the one that brought him to Willow Creek, it wasn't random. He'd saved her because she was the witness, the proof he needed. But why keep her here? Why the locked doors, the gentle touches? Her chest tightened, a mix of rage and confusion. She couldn't stay, couldn't let him use her like Raymond. She grabbed her fake ID, slipped out the window, and disappeared into the city. She had a name now, Sienna Brooks, and a purpose. Chicago was calling, where Clara's debut at the Grand Regency loomed. Lydia had been their victim, their secret, but not anymore. The memories haunted her as she boarded a bus west. She saw Raymond's cold eyes, Clara's smirk, the crash replaying in jagged pieces. She'd been there when Evelyn died, a girl she didn't know, a death she couldn't stop. Julian's face flashed too, his quiet pain, his hands on her shoulders. She pushed it down. He wasn't her savior, he was another player in this game. She'd escaped Willow Creek, shed the wristband, and now she'd escape him, her fingers clenched around the ID. Sienna Brooks didn't belong to anyone. She was free, and she'd use that freedom to burn the Foster world to the ground. The bus rumbled on, carrying her toward revenge, toward the truth she'd almost lost forever. Lydia Hart, now Sienna Brooks, stepped off the bus in Chicago with a fire in her chest. The city buzzed around her, a mix of steel and noise, but her focus was singular: the Grand Regency Hotel. Clara Foster's social debut was tonight, a glittering affair meant to crown her as the city's princess. Lydia had seen the posts online, Clara's smug face plastered across social media, her blonde curls and diamond earrings screaming privilege. Raymond stood beside her in every photo, the proud father, his politician's smile hiding the blood on his hands. They thought they'd buried Lydia, thought Willow Creek had silenced her forever. She adjusted the cheap coat she'd bought in New York, her fake ID tucked in a pocket, and walked toward the hotel. This wasn't just revenge. It was justice, for her, for the girl she'd seen die in that crash, for the life they'd stolen. The Grand Regency glowed under the night sky, its marble steps crowded with Chicago's elite. Lydia slipped through a side entrance, flashing her ID to a distracted security guard. Inside, chandeliers cast golden light over gowns and tuxedos, laughter and clinking glasses filling the air. She spotted Clara across the room, radiant in a white dress, twirling with Declan Hayes, her boyfriend, a slick guy with a trust fund and a smirk to match. Lydia's stomach twisted. Clara had everything Lydia never would: a father who chose her, a life untouched by the dirt of Willow Creek. She moved through the crowd, keeping her head low, her dark hair pulled into a tight bun. She'd practiced this, the walk, the blank smile, the naive act that had carried her this far. No one noticed her, just another face in the sea of wealth. She lingered near the bar, watching Clara soak up the attention. Declan whispered something in her ear, and she laughed, loud and sharp. Lydia's fingers clenched around a glass she'd picked up, her knuckles white. She'd dreamed of this moment, of seeing Clara's perfect world crack. But she needed a plan. She couldn't just scream the truth, not yet. Then Clara's eyes swept the room and landed on her. For a second, recognition flickered, a frown creasing that flawless face. Lydia turned away, heart pounding, but Clara was already moving toward her, Declan trailing behind. "Excuse me," Clara said, voice dripping with suspicion. "Do I know you?" Lydia tilted her head, offering a vacant smile. "Me? Oh, I don't think so. I'm just here for the party." Her voice was light, childlike, the mask she'd worn so long. Clara's eyes narrowed. "You look familiar. Where are you from?" Declan stepped closer, sizing her up. "Yeah, there's something off about you," he said, his tone sharp. Lydia giggled, twirling a strand of hair. "I'm Sienna Brooks, from nowhere special. I just like shiny things." She waved at Clara's dress, playing dumb. But Clara wasn't buying it. "Let me see your wrist," Clara demanded, grabbing Lydia's arm before she could pull back. The room seemed to hush around them, eyes turning their way. Lydia's sleeve slid up, revealing bare skin. No wristband, no mark. Clara faltered, confused, but pressed on. "You're hiding something. I know it." Declan smirked. "What's your deal, huh? Some nobody crashing my girl's night?" Lydia saw her opening. She straightened, dropping the act just enough to shift the power. "I'm not a nobody," she said, voice steady. "I'm here because I saved someone important. Miles Thornton. Maybe you've heard of him?" The name dropped like a stone, rippling through the crowd. Miles Thornton, a Texas billionaire, had a reputation in Chicago for his real estate deals. Clara scoffed. "You save Miles Thornton? Prove it." Lydia pulled out her phone, a burner she'd bought, and dialed a number she'd memorized. She'd met Miles by chance in New York, a man who'd thanked her for pulling him from a diner fire during her escape. He'd given her his card, a lifeline she hadn't planned to use until now. The call connected, and Miles's gruff voice came through on speaker. "Yeah, this is Thornton. Who's this?" Lydia smiled, loud enough for the room to hear. "It's Sienna Brooks, Mr. Thornton. I'm at the Grand Regency, and some people don't believe I helped you." Miles chuckled. "Helped me? Kid? You dragged me out of a burning building last month. I owe you my life. Tell those fools to back off." Gasps rippled through the crowd, Clara's face paling. Lydia hung up, turning to Clara with a tilt of her head. "See? I'm not just anyone." The lie held, bolstered by truth, and for a moment she had them. But Clara's eyes hardened. "I still don't trust you," she hissed, stepping closer. The tension broke when the ballroom doors swung open. Julian Pierce strode in, his presence cutting through the chatter like a blade. He wore a black suit, his dark hair slicked back, and every eye turned to him. Lydia's breath caught. She hadn't expected him here, not tonight. He moved with purpose, a laptop under his arm, and stopped in the center of the room. "Good evening," he said, voice calm but commanding. "I'm here to settle a debt." He opened the laptop, connecting it to a projector, and a grainy video flickered onto the wall. The crowd murmured, confused as the footage played. A dark road, a car swerving, headlights flashing. Raymond's face appeared behind the wheel, eyes glassy, bottle in hand. Lydia's voice screamed, "You're drunk!" Before the crash, metal crunching, flames rising. The camera caught her being dragged out, fighting, shouting the truth, until a hand clamped over her mouth, a needle jabbing her neck. The room erupted. Clara stumbled back, Declan grabbing her arm as Raymond pushed through the crowd, face red with panic. "This is a lie!" he roared, but Julian held up a hand. "It's from a dash cam recovered last year. I've waited for this moment, Foster." He turned to Lydia, eyes locking with hers. "I got a letter about a witness at Willow Creek. I found her, saved her because I knew she'd lead me to you." He faced the crowd. "Raymond Foster killed my sister Evelyn 12 years ago. Lydia Hart saw it all, and he locked her away to silence her." Gasps turned to shouts, phones flashing as people recorded. Police sirens wailed outside, closing in. Lydia's legs shook, the weight of it crashing down. She'd known pieces, remembered fragments, but seeing it raw, undeniable, ripped her open. Julian had used her, played her like a pawn. She stepped forward, voice trembling but clear. "You sent me to that place," she said, staring at Raymond. "You and Clara let them drug me, lock me up because I saw what you did." She turned to Clara, who shrank back. "You called me a burden, said I wasn't your sister. Now look at you." Clara's eyes welled up, but Lydia didn't stop. "Get on your knees and apologize," she said loud enough for the room to hear. Clara hesitated, then sank down, sobbing. "I'm sorry," as cameras clicked. Raymond lunged toward Julian, but security grabbed him, cuffs snapping on his wrists. Lydia's chest heaved, tears burning her eyes. She'd won, but it didn't feel like victory. Julian had orchestrated this, pulled her strings from the start. She turned to him, anger flaring. "You used me," she said, voice breaking. He stepped closer, the crowd fading around them. "I did," he admitted, his gaze steady. "I saved you because you were my proof, my way to get him. But it changed." He touched her arm, gentle, urgent. "I watched you fight. Saw you survive what I couldn't save Evelyn from. You're not just a witness, Lydia. You're why I'm still here." Her breath hitched, tears spilling over. He pulled her into his arms, voice low against her ear. I can't lose another person I love. The room spun, chaos swirling as police dragged Raymond out. Clara crumpled on the floor, Declan shouting over the noise. Lydia clung to Julian, her walls crumbling. He'd played her, yes, but he'd given her this moment of truth. The crowd pressed in, reporters yelling questions, but Julian shielded her, his grip firm. We're done here, he said, leading her toward the exit. She didn't resist. Didn't know what came next, only that the weight of 3 years had lifted, replaced by something new, something terrifying and alive. Raymond's empire was ash, Clara's crown shattered, and Lydia had her voice back. Julian had given her that, and maybe, just maybe, more. Lydia Hart stood alone by Lake Michigan, the wind whipping her hair across her face. The city's lights glittered in the distance, a world away from the chaos of the Grand Regency Hotel. Her coat hung loose around her shoulders, the cheap fabric no match for the chill, but she didn't care. She needed this, the quiet, the space to breathe after everything. The night replayed in her mind, sharp and jagged, Raymond's cuffs clinking as police hauled him away, Clara's tear-streaked face as she knelt, the weight of Julian's arms pulling her close. She'd won, hadn't she? Justice had come, swift and brutal, tearing down the Foster empire she'd dreamed of destroying. But victory felt hollow, a shell around the pieces of herself she'd lost along the way. She sat on a bench, staring at the dark water, her hands tracing the spot where the wristband once sat. 3 years in Willow Creek, 3 years of drugs and lies, all because Raymond couldn't face his own guilt. She'd been 10 when her mother died, a gentle woman who'd loved her fiercely despite the cracks in their little family. Lydia remembered her voice, soft and warm, reading bedtime stories about brave girls who slayed dragons. That warmth faded when Raymond took over, his cold ambition filling the void. He'd never wanted her, not really, only tolerated her for her mother's sake. Clara was his pride, his blood, and Lydia was the outsider, the stepdaughter he could discard. She'd tried to belong, tried to earn his approval, but the crash ended that. He'd chosen Clara, chosen his career, and thrown Lydia into a cage to rot. The memories flooded back now, clearer since the hotel. She saw the car spinning, Evelyn's screams mixing with hers, the bottle rolling at Raymond's feet. She'd fought to tell the truth, clawing at the hands that dragged her out, but they'd silenced her with a needle, buried her in Willow Creek. Her mother's face flickered too, a ghost of comfort she hadn't felt in years. Lydia pressed her palms to her eyes, tears slipping through her fingers. She'd done it for herself, for that scared girl in the car, for the mother who'd loved her when no one else would. But Julian's words echoed, cutting through the pain. I can't lose another person I love. He'd used her, yes, but he'd stayed, fought for her, and that scared her more than anything. Footsteps crunched behind her, steady and familiar. She didn't turn, didn't need to. Julian Pierce sat beside her, his presence a quiet weight. He didn't speak at first, just looked out at the lake, hands clasped between his knees. She stole a glance, his profile sharp against the night, dark hair falling over his forehead. At 30, he carried 12 years of grief. A man who'd built an empire but couldn't outrun his past. She waited, expecting him to explain, to justify, but he surprised her. I was wrong, he said, voice low. I saved you for Evelyn, for the justice I owed her. I thought that's all it was. He turned to her, eyes searching hers. But you changed it. You changed me. She swallowed, throat tight. You used me, Julian. You pulled me out of one prison and put me in another. He nodded, no defense, just acceptance. I did. I got that letter, tracked you down, saw your face and thought you were my answer. I locked you in Ravenwood because I couldn't risk losing you before I got to Foster. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration breaking through, but it wasn't just about the plan. Every time you smiled that fake smile, every time you tripped over nothing, I saw you fighting. You were stronger than I ever was. and I couldn't let you go." Lydia's chest ached, his words pulling at the walls she'd built. She wanted to hate him, to push him away, but the truth was there, raw and undeniable. "What about Evelyn?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. He looked down, hands tightening. "She was everything to me. 12 years ago, we fought about college. She wanted to stay close. I told her to chase her dreams. I was harsh, stupid, and she stormed out. I should have driven her home, but I didn't. She got in that car with Foster and I lost her." His voice cracked and he pressed a fist to his mouth. "I've hated myself every day since. When I found out it was him, I swore I'd make him pay. Then I found you." He reached into his pocket, pulling out a thin silver chain with a small pendant, a delicate E engraved on it. "This was hers," he said, holding it out. "I kept it, a reminder of what I failed to do. But you're not her, Lydia. You're not a replacement." He took her hand, pressing the necklace into her palm. "You're the light I didn't think I'd find. I saved you for her, but I'm here now because of you." Her fingers closed around the chain, the metal cool against her skin. Tears welled up again, but this time they weren't for pain. She saw it in his eyes, the guilt he'd carried, the love he hadn't planned. He wasn't Raymond, wasn't Clara. He'd hurt her, but he'd healed her too. She leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder, and he wrapped an arm around her, pulling her close. "I thought I'd lost everything," he murmured, lips brushing her hair. "Then you walked into my life, and I couldn't let you go." She tilted her face up, meeting his gaze, and he kissed her, slow and deep, under the moonlight. It wasn't a fix, wasn't an ending to the scars they both bore, but it was a beginning. She tasted salt on his lips, her tears or his, and for the first time in years, she felt whole. They sat there, tangled together, the lake stretching out before them, a promise of something new. Back in Chicago, the Foster name was rubble. Raymond's arrest hit the news like a storm, headlines screaming about the crash, the cover-up, the girl he'd locked away. Reporters camped outside his mansion, cameras catching every moment of his downfall. Clara's perfect life unraveled faster. Her debut became a scandal, her friends turning their backs, her social media flooded with hate. She'd called Lydia once, hours after the hotel, her voice small through the phone. "I didn't mean it," she'd said, sobbing. "Please, I'm sorry." Lydia listened, silent, then hung up. Clara wasn't her sister, not anymore. Raymond tried too, leaving a voicemail from jail, begging for forgiveness, claiming he'd had no choice. She deleted it without a word. They'd made their choices, and she'd made hers. She looked at Julian, his hand warm in hers, and stood. "I want to leave," she said, voice steady. "Chicago, all of it. I need a fresh start." He nodded, squeezing her fingers. "Wherever you go, I'm with you." They walked to his car, the necklace around her neck now, a symbol not of loss, but of redemption. She thought of her mother, the woman who'd believed in brave girls, and smiled. She'd slayed her dragons, not alone, but with someone who saw her, really saw. The car pulled away, leaving the city behind, the lake fading in the rearview mirror. Lydia didn't know what came next. Didn't need to. She'd reclaimed her life, her voice, her heart. Julian had given her justice, but more than that, he'd given her a chance to heal. They'd both been broken, both carried ghosts, but together, they'd found something stronger. As the road stretched ahead, she leaned against him, the past shrinking with every mile. She was free, truly free, and for the first time she believed in tomorrows. To you watching this, I ask, can love mend the deepest wounds? Can two fractured souls build something whole? Tell me what you think, because their story, our story, isn't over yet.